Knowledge does not make you a god, talking monkey.
Makes me a god. Now, about our agreement.
On a typical rainy night, scientist Luke took a cab to a villa. He had received an anonymous invitation to participate in a secret experiment on bioquantum. Inside the villa, he met a peculiar-looking old man and two women with contrasting personalities. The woman in leather was an expert in quantum mechanics, while the Russian woman with gloves was a medical student with empathic psychic abilities. She wore gloves to block her powers. Soon after, Luke met Nick, an African-American pharmaceutical scientist. All four had received invitations and were puzzled about the purpose of the meeting. Later, several strangely dressed employees arrived, instructing them to take their luggage upstairs and then enjoy dinner together. The four went to their respective rooms. While Luke was bending over to unpack, he suddenly felt someone behind him. He quickly turned around but saw nothing. Luke smiled wryly, thinking it was just his nerves. After unpacking, the four gathered in the dining room for dinner. Dr. Richard, the villa's owner, finally appeared. Everyone had heard of him. He was a tech mogul spanning multiple academic fields. However, in 1973, he was exiled from the United States for unethical human experiments. Clearly dissatisfied with this arrangement, Richard became agitated when discussing his expulsion. Noticing Richard's discomfort, an employee named Klaatu brought over a porcelain bowl and applied medicine to a strange wound on Richard's neck. The four guests exchanged puzzled glances, unsure of what was happening. Dr. Richard then began to critique each of his guests. He started with Nick, whose hallucinogenic pills had harmed thousands of teenagers. At a large party last September, Nick's drugs killed 250 teenagers. Thanks to an elite lawyer hired at a high price, Nick avoided prison. Next, Dr. Richard spoke about Mina, the woman in leather, an Argentine-American first-generation citizen. She was exceptionally bright and a top student. However, unknown to many, Mina was a murderer, having killed 2 people. Then, he turned to the Russian woman, Sophie. Since her twin sister's death, Sophie had been obsessed with near-death experiences. She loved using her empathic abilities to feel the pain of the dying. She even used her medical student status to secretly inject patients with heart-stopping drugs. Interrupting, Luke revealed his own past. He had accidentally killed his fiancée. Dr. Richard explained that he wasn't threatening them by revealing their pasts. Rather, he believed they were all similar, willing to break any law to get what they wanted. This was why he had gathered them for a secret experiment. The key to controlling time, he said, was controlling space. Dr. Richard wanted to break through quantum barriers and enter another dimension. After his explanation, he had his staff bring in a briefcase. Inside the briefcase were 4 vials of quantum amine, a substance capable of rearranging every molecule inside and around the human body. This was one of the keys to breaking through the quantum barrier. Additionally, biomechanical components and mental control abilities were required. Dr. Richard had already solved the hardest part, the creation of quantum amine. The rest would be up to his 4 guests to research. He would provide them with a laboratory. Hearing this, everyone became excited. If the experiment succeeded, they would clear their names and achieve historical renown. Dr. Richard led them to the laboratory, where they immediately noticed a giant tuning fork. Its purpose was to generate frequencies and synchronize the proton waves in the room. However, Dr. Richard had not yet found the correct frequency, leaving this challenge for Luke to solve. Sophie's psychic abilities soon manifested as she sensed a dark presence. Dr. Richard explained that someone had recently died in the lab. In their efforts to break the quantum barrier, they needed to vaporize quantum amine for stable atomization. The liquid form of quantum amine would dissolve skin tissue upon contact, which led to the death of his partner and the loss of his own legs, now necessitating a wheelchair. At that moment, Klaatu approached and whispered something to Dr. Richard. The doctor announced he had an urgent matter in Geneva and would leave the 4 to their research. Everything in the lab would be automatically recorded on a secure server. With that, he departed, and the 4 scientists immediately dove into their work. Dr. Richard had already completed most of the work. Their only remaining challenge was how to keep a human alive in a state of dual separation. The first step was to balance quantum entanglement. Dr. Richard had already pointed the way. Vaporize the quantum amine, giving the body enough time to achieve superposition, keeping the internal and external quantum amine balanced, and ensuring everything proceeded at a controlled speed. Converting liquid quantum amine to a gaseous state fell to Nick. Luke and Mina were tasked with adjusting the tuning fork's frequency to maintain a constant hertz and synchronize the protons in the room. Dr. Richard had left Sophie a special device to enhance her psychic abilities and connect the consciousness of the four, acting as the team's mental anchor. With their roles and directions clear, they set to work. However, Dr. Richard did not go to Geneva. Instead, he entered a secret lab and sealed himself inside a mysterious apparatus. The team began their first attempt, proceeding methodically according to the plan. The wonders brought by quantum amine flashed through their minds, and they all developed wounds similar to Dr. Richard's. When the hallucinations ended, the lab was in disarray. The quantum amine and research data had disappeared, and all backup data was gone. Mina, with a splitting headache, just wanted to rest. Luke and the others followed her out of the lab, leaving Sophie behind. Suddenly, the screen in front of Sophie lit up, displaying a woman who looked just like her, except with a black mole near her eye. It was her twin sister. Sophie felt a sharp headache. When the others returned to the lab, they found her collapsed on the floor. They quickly carried Sophie out of the lab, with Mina helping her upstairs to rest. Sophie quietly told Mina, using her psychic abilities, "We are not safe," but she couldn't pinpoint the source of the danger. Meanwhile, the two men were in a room, planning to use Nick's drugs to alleviate their stress. In a daze, Luke thought he heard his fiance's voice. Although he couldn't see her, the security camera in the corner captured a woman's silhouette. Klaatu watched everything with great interest. Late at night, a mysterious energy moved through the villa. It reached the second floor and entered Sophie's room. Sophie was in the bathroom taking a shower when something suddenly hit the shower curtain. She thought Mina was playing a prank, but when she pulled back the curtain, no one was there. Sophie hurriedly finished her shower and came out, wrapped in a towel, to check. She found the word murderer written on the mirror. The bathroom door was also locked. Sophie wiped away the word and looked at her reflection. The Sophie in the mirror smiled eerily. It was her twin sister again. The next moment, her sister broke through the mirror and grabbed Sophie's neck. Sophie struggled, but to no avail. She grabbed a shard of the broken mirror and stabbed her sister, but it seemed to have no effect. Her sister did not let go, and Sophie lost her breath. Her twin then leaned into her chest and entered Sophie's body. The broken mirror instantly restored itself, and Sophie found herself trapped in the mirror while her twin took over her body. Meanwhile, Nick, unable to sleep, got up to eat something. He saw a beautiful woman and, driven by lust, followed her. The scene suddenly changed, and Nick found himself in a bar party. The woman reappeared, dancing seductively around him. Nick enjoyed her kiss, but then tasted his hallucinogenic pills. Horrible memories of the 250 teenagers who died because of his drugs flooded his mind. He shouted to everyone, "Spit out the pills!" But the people around him turned into grotesque demons. They swarmed Nick and tore his flesh apart. This showed how both Nick and Sophie were tormented by their past experiences.
God, please forgive me!
At that moment, Luke also saw his fiancée, but instead of the radiant woman he remembered, she was covered in rotting wounds. Through their conversation, it became clear that their experiment had indeed opened the quantum barrier. The entities they encountered were beings from another dimension. The scene shifted to Mina, who saw a heavy downpour outside. The entire villa was floating in midair. Mina realized their experiment might have succeeded and that they were now in the quantum realm. Suddenly, Sophie, who had been possessed by her twin, appeared holding a shard of the broken mirror and attempted to kill Mina. Meanwhile, Nick, whose skin had been peeled off, went insane and tried to kill Luke to return to reality. Panicked, Mina came downstairs, and Luke took advantage of Nick's distraction to stab him in the chest. He grabbed Mina, trying to escape, but Sophie chased after them and stabbed Mina with the mirror shard. The scene descended into chaos, and both Nick and Mina, now dead, transformed into quantum beings. Luke was the only one left truly alive. He flung open the door, desperate to leave, but a giant octopus tentacle blocked his way. He slammed the door shut and braced himself. At that moment, Dr. Richard reappeared. In the quantum realm, his legs were no longer crippled. It was all part of his sinister plan. He had already discovered how to enter the quantum realm and had been serving a quantum demon. Dr. Richard had gathered the four because their souls were wicked enough to be the demon's preferred delicacy. He had deceived them into entering the quantum realm. Hearing this, Luke tried to run, but no matter which direction he fled, he ended up back in the hall. The entire place was an illusion created by Dr. Richard's mind. The only way to return to the real world was to kill Dr. Richard. Dr. Richard agreed to a duel with Luke. Instantly, the villa transformed into a grassy field. Nick brought 2 guns, and they prepared to duel in the style of the American West. However, Luke's gun was fake and couldn't fire. Dr. Richard shot him in the chest without hesitation. Now, all 4 were dead. The quantum demon finally appeared, its head resembling a giant octopus. Dr. Richard had kept his promise and delivered their souls, receiving his reward from the demon. The scene shifted to Klaatu, who activated a mysterious device. Dr. Richard, now with healthy legs and a radiant appearance, emerged. He disposed of the scientists' bodies and left the ancient villa.